the Battle of Talavera, with the British on this side and the French on that other side. Pretty large battle, as you can see, with units in every section of the map. I've set up the game to play with a friend of mine who's coming over any minute now and who has never played the system. I thought that this could be a good battle to get him started, precisely because there are units everywhere, so he's not likely to find himself in the situation where he has cards for one section and no units in that section. When you know how to play the system, you know that there are ways in which you can minimize the odds of finding yourself in that situation, but I don't want him to have to worry about that. I want him to have fun and to be able to move units and do a lot of things. Also, in this battle, the Allied side is represented by the British only, no Portuguese units, so less things to worry about. And the river stops movement, like rivers usually do, but does not affect combat. So again, less things to keep track of. And well, there are a bunch of hills here. I'm kind of curious to see how these will work, how players can work around them, and especially around the fact that these hills will block line of sight and create the plateau effect in many cases. But the battle seems pretty interesting. A lot of units, probably is going to be epic. So, well, I'm going to play the battle in a little bit and then I'll report later and I will tell you my impressions about it. Fun. The scenario is fun to play, a lot of units on the board meant a lot of action, a lot of back and forth, the possibility of using pretty much any card that one had in one's hand, because there were always units that one could apply those cards to. Really a lot of fun. My friend, it was the first time that he played the game. He kind of underestimated the importance of protecting his paths of retreat, and that means that sometimes I use my cavalry units to block those paths, and then I use other units to attack his units from the front, and that created a pretty devastating sandwich effect that had an overall impact on the course of the battle. But my friend still had a good time playing the game, so did I. But it is important to note that my friend is a very seasoned, very competent grognard. I'm saying this to add evidence against the myth that wargamers cannot enjoy the commands and colors system. They can, I can, my friend can. I'm sure that there are other wargamers out there that can have a lot of fun with this game. But let me show you some other scenarios that you will find in this game. River co-op. If you like a good challenge, play the French side in this scenario. The French side will try to stop the Anglo-Portuguese forces from evacuating from the board, and the Anglo-Portuguese army will gain a victory point for each unit that is exited from that bridge hexed. That is huge, especially if you consider that there already are so many units here, and the Anglo-Portuguese player only needs 6 victory points to win the game. So probably the French player will not have the luxury of moving a large number of units to attack the Anglo-Portuguese line, just because that would take too much time, and by the time a large group of French units are there, probably enough Anglo-Portuguese units will have left the board so that the enemy player will have won the game. On the other hand, if you concentrate on just few units, you just rush them against the enemy, trying to target weak units just to gain points before they leave the board, then you find yourself outnumbered. You find yourself with only few units here adjacent to a large number of enemy units, and they will probably hit you hard and do some damage. Also, units that are weakened by your attacks may still try to sneak away, and they still count for victory points for the Anglo-Portuguese players. So I just found that here the choice really seems to be between losing the game for the French player because many units have been evacuated, or losing the game because of a combination of evacuated units and your own units being destroyed. Very tough. Very tough. I played as a French player, I lost miserably, and I think that this scenario is going to be tough for the French player. Battle of Garcia Hernandez. Probably the fastest battle to set up due to the very small number of terrain tiles that are used. French versus British. The French player has a pretty good group of infantry units with some cavalry ready to support the infantry here, and some infantry units of the French player already start the game in square, ready to defend against the adjacent British cavalry. The British player only has cavalry. There is no supporting infantry, no supporting artillery. And this is a problem because squares are particularly effective in delaying enemy cavalry, in forcing the cavalry to launch a weak attack after the other. It can really erode the strength of the enemy cavalry slowly but steadily. And in fact, the best way to attack infantry squares is to combine cavalry with artillery infantry. Without that support, the British cavalry is at a disadvantage, even more so if the French player decides to use his cavalry units to support the infantry that is defending against the cavalry. Then the cavalry may find itself in a little bit of a pincer there. To counterbalance this, the disadvantage that the British player will have, there is a special rule here that says that the British player gains a victory point for the first French infantry unit that is eliminated, but then 2 victory points for each infantry unit that is eliminated up to that. So that makes things a little fair. Still, things may be a little tough for the British player. Overall, a very fun scenario, a lot of movement, interesting choices. I really enjoyed playing this scenario.